What if I told you that pouring a glass of wine when you specifically promised yourself you wouldn't isn't actually a failure of your willpower? Like, what if it's, bizarrely enough, your brain operating at absolute peak efficiency?
I mean, it really completely flips the script on how we view our evening routines, doesn't it?
It really, really does. And welcome to today's deep dive. We are talking directly to you today. So I want you to picture this scenario because it is just incredibly common.
Oh, absolutely. It happens to so many people.
Right. So you wake up, you feel fresh, and you make a promise to yourself with absolute unwavering certainty. You say, tonight I'm skipping that evening drink.
Yeah, you're totally resolute.
Exactly. Maybe it's a glass of wine, maybe it's a beer, but your motivation is just sky high. And then, 7.0 p.m. rolls around.
And then it all changes.
Right. Somehow, almost like you're watching someone else's hands do the work, you just find yourself in the kitchen pouring that exact drink completely on autopilot. You're just kind of watching it happen.
It's a surreal feeling, for sure.
Yeah, so if you're nodding your head right now, our mission today is to entirely demystify this nightly habit.
And we have some really incredible insights to guide us today from Susan Gast. She's the creator of Live Better Sober.
Which is a fantastic resource, by the way.
It really is. She has been alcohol-free for over 25 years now, and she has spent that time intensely studying the actual physical mechanics of this evening phenomenon.
Right, and her central thesis is just this massive structural paradigm shift for anyone who is struggling with this.
Exactly, and that shift starts with completely throwing out the concept of character. Because, for so long the narrative has been, if I can't stick to my morning promise, I'm weak, I lack discipline.
Which is such a heavy burden to carry around.
It's exhausting. And that is the very first thing we need to dismantle here. You're not lacking willpower. This is not some sort of character flaw.
Okay, let's unpack this, because getting rid of that moral failing idea feels like a huge relief, but it also leaves a really big question mark for me.
What's the question mark?
Well, if it's not a lack of willpower, what is actually happening in our heads at the end of the day? Why does the motivation we had at 8 a.m. just completely vanish by sunset?
Right. Well, to understand that, we have to look at how the brain actually manages energy. We tend to think of willpower as a character trait-like. You either have it or you don't.
Right, like a personality quirk.
Exactly. But biologically speaking, willpower is an action. Specifically, it's an action performed by the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for complex planning, impulse control, and forward thinking.
Basically the logical adult part of the brain.
Yes, the adult in the room. But here is the catch. The prefrontal cortex is an absolute energy hog. I mean, it requires a massive amount of metabolic energy just to function.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So every single time you make a decision during the day, you are burning through that fuel.
So, when you navigate rush hour traffic.
Exactly. Or when you decide how to diplomatically word an email to a frustrating coworker. Even when you choose the salad over the donut at lunch, you are depleting that specific energy reserve.
So by the time evening arrives, your brain has reached a state of, profound decision fatigue.
You've got it. It's completely tapped out.
Oh, man. So it's literally like a smartphone hitting 1% battery at the end of the day.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Because, when my phone hits 1%, the screen automatically dims, the background apps stop refreshing. It just physically force closes anything that requires too much juice.
Yes, to keep the core systems running.
Right. So you're saying the brain is doing the exact same thing. It just force closes the willpower app because it's too expensive to run.
That is precisely what is happening. The neurological reality perfectly mirrors your smartphone analogy.
Yeah.
Your brain shifts into this metabolic low power mode to protect itself.
Wow, that is wild.
So when you are standing in your kitchen at 7.0 p.m., trying to summon the discipline to not pour a drink, you're basically trying to run a high-energy app on a completely dead battery.
The hardware literally cannot support the command.
Exactly. Your brain isn't looking to execute discipline. It is actively, desperately seeking and the conservation of energy.
That reframing is just incredible. It's not a moral failure. The battery's just dead.
It takes so much of the guilt out of the equation.
It really does. But wait, I do have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Because if my brain is completely out of energy and it's in this protective low power mode, how does it suddenly summon the energy to launch a full-scale, intense craving?
That's a great point.
Right, because that feeling of needing a drink and physically walking to the kitchen to get it, that feels like a very active, driven process. It doesn't feel passive at all.
That is a fantastic question, and it is the exact pivot point where the brain's survival mechanisms kind of trick us.
How so?
Well, what's fascinating here is that when the prefrontal cortex, that high-energy logical part, powers down, the brain doesn't just stop working altogether.
Right. Obviously, we're still awake.
Exactly. Instead, it hands the steering wheel over to a much older, much more energy-efficient part of the brain called the basal ganglia.
Okay, and what exactly does the basal ganglia do?
It is the habit center. It stores automated routines. Unlike conscious decision-making, running a habit requires almost zero metabolic energy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's like a line of code that just executes automatically. And GAST's work leans heavily into this transition.
So the sudden urge you feel isn't your brain expending new energy?
No, not at all. It's your brain blindly clicking play on a pre-recorded tape just to save energy. This is what we call the habit loop.
So basically, because the brain is too tired to think of a new way to wind down, it just grabs the most deeply grooved, familiar path available.
Yes, you nailed it. And that habit loop is a very specific three-part mechanical engine.
Okay, what are the parts?
First, there is the trigger, or the cue. Then there's the routine. And finally, you have the reward.
Okay, let's break those down. I mean, the routine is obvious. It's the physical pouring and drinking of the beverage, right?
Correct.
And the reward is that chemical wave of relief or relaxation you get afterward.
Exactly.
But the trigger, usually when I think of triggers, I think of emotional states, like I had a really stressful day at work, or I'm totally exhausted, or maybe the kids were acting up.
Those are very common ones.
Right, so those internal feelings are the cue, right?
They are definitely part of the cue, absolutely. Emotional exhaustion and stress are very powerful primers. But here is something GAST emphasizes that totally changes the game.
What's that?
Your living room is quietly conspiring against you.
Wait, my living room? What do you mean by that?
The physical environment is the invisible half of the trigger. We completely underestimate how much our physical surroundings dictate our automatic behaviors.
Oh, like where we are in the house.
Exactly. Think about it. When you walk into your house, you might drop your keys in the exact same spot every day.
Yeah, on the little table by the door.
Right. You might kick off your shoes, walk into the kitchen, stand in the exact same spot near the fridge, and look out the exact same window.
Oh, I see where this is going. All those tiny physical details.
Yes. And your basal ganglia is constantly scanning your environment for patterns. It notices the lighting in the kitchen at 7:00 p.m.
It hears the hum of the fridge.
Exactly. It feels the texture of the cabinet handle because you have performed the routine of pouring a drink in that exact environment hundreds or even thousands of times.
So those sensory inputs just bypass the logical brain entirely.
They do. They send a direct signal to the habit center saying, the lighting is like this, we are standing here, and we feel stressed. It is time for the sequence.
That is wildly fascinating. It's not just a feeling, it's a geographical location. The brain is literally reading the room.
Literally reading the room. And the reason it does this is purely evolutionary. The brain constantly optimizes for predictability.
Because predicting an outcome takes less energy.
Exactly. Predicting an outcome requires much less energy than analyzing a completely new situation. So when you combine the time of day, the internal exhaustion, and the same physical environment.
The brain just connects the dots and initiates the habit.
Yes. Why? Because, as Gass points out in her work, familiarity feels safe.
Familiarity feels safe. Man, we really need to pause and look at that for a second.
It's a powerful statement.
It is. Familiarity feels safe. That is such a profound, almost uncomfortable truth to apply to a habit we might actively want to change.
It really forces you to look at your routines differently.
Right, because it means the brain actually doesn't care if the habit aligns with our long-term health or our morning promises. It just cares that it knows the ending of the movie.
Precisely. Your nervous system is prioritizing predictability over your highest aspirations. It knows the exact sequence of events.
Grab glass, pour liquid, sit on couch.
Right. Feel that temporary dopamine release. There are absolutely no variables. There are no unknowns. To a depleted brain, that absolute certainty is incredibly soothing.
And I imagine the more you do it, the stronger it gets.
Oh, definitely. The more this loop repeats, the more the neurological pathway gets reinforced until it stops feeling like a conscious choice at all.
It just becomes this automatic sequence your brain runs to transition from the chaos of the day to the safety of the night.
Exactly.
Okay, so if we accept this, if we accept that the evening drink is just a mechanical loop, a tape playing in the background triggered by a tired brain in a familiar kitchen, why is it so excruciatingly hard to just not do it?
That's the big question.
Right, because it doesn't just feel like a minor inconvenience when you try to skip it. Skipping that drink can feel like a full-blown emotional crisis.
Oh, absolutely. People report feeling highly agitated.
Yeah, your skin crawls, you feel anxious. If it's just a mechanical glitch, why does the alarm bell ring so loudly?
Well, it's because of what you are actually removing. This is the part of the process when people get tripped up and overwhelmed by frustration.
Here's where it gets really interesting then.
Yes. When you make that morning promise to skip the wine, you think you are just making a beverage choice. You think, tonight, I will drink sparkling water instead of Cabernet.
Right, you view it as a simple substitution of liquids, which sounds so simple on paper.
But from your brain's perspective, you aren't just removing a liquid. You are abruptly ripping out a deeply ingrained, heavily relied upon ritual.
Wow.
You are removing the only bridge your brain has constructed to cross over from the high-stress demands of the workday into the relaxation of the evening.
Oh man, it's a structural issue. It makes me think of a house.
A house. How so?
It's like stopping the nightly drink isn't like walking into the living room and just unscrewing a light bulb. It is like taking a sledgehammer and knocking out a massive load-bearing pillar right in the middle of your evening routine.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Right. Of course, the whole house groans, the walls shake, the structure feels completely unsound.
That load-bearing pillar analogy hits on exactly what Gas teaches. When you knock out that pillar, you create a massive structural void.
And nature abhors a vacuum?
Exactly. And biologically, that void is highly uncomfortable. Because remember the reward part of the habit loop.
The dopamine.
Right. Over time, your brain has come to expect a very specific, very reliable hit of dopamine at 7 euro p.m. And dopamine isn't just about pleasure, it's a neurotransmitter heavily involved in anticipation and reward seeking.
So when 7 BOPM hits, my brain is already releasing the neurochemicals, expecting the reward.
Yes. Your brain starts prepping for the reward just based on the cues alone, the lighting, the time, the stress.
And then nothing happens.
Right. When you suddenly withhold the routine, your brain experiences a sharp dopamine deficit. That deficit feels like anxiety. It feels like intense agitation.
It feels like the house is shaking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And socially, we don't really have many built-in rituals anymore for crossing that boundary from productive worker to relaxed human.
That's so true. We just work until we stop.
For many people, the pop of a cork or the crack of a can has become the sole psychological drawbridge being lowered to signal that the day is done.
The drawbridge. I love that. And when you refuse to lower the drawbridge, you're just standing there on the edge of the moat, completely stuck in work mode, but too tired to actually work.
You are entirely stranded. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where Susan Gass provides a truly vital reframing for anyone in that moment of struggle.
What's the reframe?
Well, when you remove that ritual and that pillar, the evening is suddenly going to feel incredibly empty. You will likely feel bored, restless, or highly anxious.
Which makes people think they're failing.
Exactly. But the vital shift in perspective is this: that immense discomfort is not a failure on your part. It is not a sign that you are weak.
And it's definitely not a sign that you genuinely need the alcohol to survive.
Exactly.
So what is it then?
It is simply a gap. It is a physical and psychological empty space that you have just actively created. The old habit occupied that space. Now the space is empty, and it is loudly demanding to be filled.
A gap? Just an empty space? It is amazing how much power there is in simply changing the vocabulary we use to describe our own internal experiences.
Words matter so much.
They really do. Because when you're sitting on the couch and you call that feeling a craving or a weakness, it feels like a monster you have to fight. It feels like an opponent.
It feels insurmountable.
Right. But when you reframe it and call it a gap, well, a gap is just an architectural problem. It's just a hole you need to fill with something else.
And look at what that reframing does to the emotion of shame. Shame is an incredibly heavy burden, and neurologically speaking, it is a terrible motivator for long-term behavioral change.
Doesn't shame actually make things worse?
It does. Shame actually generates more stress, which ironically triggers the habit loop all over again.
Wow, it's a trap.
It is. So when you view the discomfort as simply an empty space waiting for a new routine, You step entirely out of a state of self-judgment and into a state of strategy.
You stop fighting your own character and start looking for new ways to signal safety and relaxation to your exhausted brain.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all these threads together, the 1% depleted brain, the environmental triggers in our kitchen, the load-bearing pillar that leaves a painful gap when we remove it.
It paints a very clear picture.
It does. It sounds to me like we are treating this habit much more like a structural engineering project than a lifelong character sentence.
That is exactly what it is. And that is the fundamental, actionable hope at the core of Susan Gast's 25 years of experience.
That's the good news.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because if you treat it as a structural problem, it becomes an entirely solvable problem. The core principle is deeply empowering.
Which is?
If a habit was learned by the brain, it can absolutely be unlearned and replaced by the brain. Neuroplasticity guarantees this.
But the key is that we can't just throw more willpower at it, right? Because the battery is dead.
Exactly. You do not need to try harder. Trying harder is just yelling at a dead battery to turn on.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Right.
Instead of using force, you use strategy. You need to deeply understand the pattern and systematically work with your brain's existing architecture.
And what's really interesting to me about Gast's approach is how she defines the problem itself.
How do you mean?
Well, because a lot of people might listen to this and think, well, I only have one glass of wine, or I only drink, craft beer, so this isn't a problem for me.
Ah, yes. The comparison game.
Right. But it's not necessarily about the sheer volume of what you're pouring.
No, it's not. Gast makes a very clear distinction here. The red flag, the true indicator of an issue, isn't necessarily the frequency or the volume alone.
So what is the red flag?
The real question you have to ask yourself is this. Does the habit feel automatic? Does it feel out of your hands?
Oh, that's a tough question.
It is. If you genuinely want to stop for a night, do you find it incredibly difficult to do so? If you're promising yourself in the morning that you won't drink and doing it anyway in the evening, then the habit loop has hijacked the control center.
The automation is the issue.
Exactly. The automation is the real problem.
So if the automation is the issue and willpower isn't the answer, how do we actually fix the structure?
With a plan.
Right, because just sitting on the couch, staring at the wall, white-knuckling through the gap and being miserable, that doesn't sound sustainable at all.
No, the white-knuckling approach is notoriously terrible.
Yeah.
It relies entirely on willpower, which we've established is depleted.
It's doomed from the start.
It really is. It's miserable, it's exhausting, and it usually ends with you giving in just to make the internal noise stop.
So what's the actual solution?
The actual solution is systematically replacing the pattern. Gast teaches this exact structural approach step by step in her course.
What's the course called?
It's called 66 Days to Break the Nightly Drinking Habit.
Okay, why 66 days? That seems very specific.
It is. Research in behavioral psychology suggests that, on average, it takes about 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's not a magic number, but it highlights that this is a process of physical rewiring. It takes time. The whole point of her approach is to completely remove the mystery.
So you aren't just flailing in the dark.
Exactly. You don't have to sit there guessing why you feel terrible. You don't have to rely on discipline. You actively rebuild the architecture of your evening.
By experimenting.
Yes, you experiment with new cues, new routines, and new rewards to give your brain that dopamine transition it craves, but in a way that actually serves you.
So you're basically constructing a new drawbridge.
Precisely. You build a new drawbridge.
Okay.
And once the mystery of why you are doing this is removed, the shame completely evaporates, and real sustainable progress can finally begin.
Wow. This has been such a practical and honestly relieving conversation.
I think it offers a lot of hope.
It really does. If you are listening to this right now, the takeaways are incredibly clear, and they completely change the rules of the game.
They absolutely do.
First, your evening decision fatigue is very, very real. By 7:00 p.m., your prefrontal cortex is tapped out and your willpower battery is dead.
0%.
Right. Second, that nightly urge isn't some demon, it's just a habit loop. It is an invisible but totally predictable machine running in the background, aided and abetted by the physical cues in your living room.
The secret agents in your house.
Exactly. And finally, if you try to stop and it feels awful, that immense discomfort isn't a sign of weakness. It's just a structural gap.
Yes.
It's a load-bearing pillar that you've removed, waiting to be carefully and deliberately filled with a new routine.
It really is a complete paradigm shift. But, it also raises an incredibly important and perhaps slightly provocative question for all of us to consider.
Oh.
Well, the insights we've explored today reveal so clearly that our exhausted evening brains will blindly run a familiar, unhelpful script for the simple reason that familiarity feels safe.
Right.
We've applied that to an evening drink today. But if that biological mechanism is true, what other areas of our lives are we running on pure, unexamined autopilot?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy thought.
Right. Are there recurring conflicts in our relationships? Is there an endless cycle of evening screen time, scrolling through our phones for 2 hours?
Guilty as charged.
Or even negative self-talk that we engage in right before bed? Are we just accepting these things as how things are, simply because our brains are too tired to seek a better alternative?
That is a phenomenal thought to sit with. How many of our choices, our habits, our reactions, our daily lives are really just our tired brains taking the path of least resistance because it feels predictable?
It's definitely something to reflect on.